Whoa, cool intro hook with awesome visuals and music to get your attention so you'll watch my video essay. Okay, cool. Now that that's over and done with, you know what the video's about. Invincible Season 3 is not good.
Fuck you!
Yes, I know most people thought it was. Yes, I know Season 4 is about to come out, and this video should have came out like 10 months ago. And yes, I know this may come off as simply rage bait to get views. But no, it wasn't good, and no, this isn't rage bait. I've rewatched Season 3 multiple times. I've tried discussing it with people who do like it, and I've watched several reviews, and every time I always come away with a, that's it. It seemed I was alone on this.
I am so lonely.
Perhaps I was wrong. Perhaps I just didn't understand. So I rewatched the entire season again with someone I knew. And what I saw only gave weight to what I thought. Now, before we continue, I saw a lot of people chalking up criticisms of Season 3 to people hating on it because of the poor animation, and I'm here to say that that is not what the focus of the video will be. Yes, the animation is very bad at times, but there are worse problems in the show that I feel need to be talked about.
Stand ready for my arrival, worm. You were given orders. You were given time. You were given more leeway than most, and yet I find this planet unprepared for the arrival of our Viltrum Empire.
This will also be why I think Season 4 will not actually be that good. Yes, obviously there are positives in the show, such as the parts featuring Omni-Man, Deborah's relationship with Paul, and Oliver was also very entertaining. However, let's be honest, Rex carried the season. Only guy on the Guardians of the Globe to get a dub. The other positive is almost the entirety of Episode 8. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. Easily the best episode of Season 3 and Season 2. Still overrated though. Again, we'll cross this bridge when we get there. Also, the songs in Invincible are ass. Not going to bring it up for the rest of the reviews, so just thought I would say that now. Cue the awesome transition into saying the word Invincible. Oh. Alright, so we'll be going over this episode by episode. Conveniently enough, we're starting with one of the worst episodes in the show. One of the first things we see in this episode is how Mark is training and has improved dramatically, being essentially able to lift mountains and move faster than spaceships, which was also highlighted in all the promotional material. So, of course, the first thing we see of Mark is him not immediately taking down two guys who are essentially normal dudes. Of course. Also, Rex being the only member of Guardians of the Globe to get a dub this season. Let's go. I know I already said that. I don't give a fuck. Rex deserves to be glazed. Anyways, I don't want to hear the excuse of them talking when they're both experienced heroes. An example of how this should have gone is in the Justice League show. Here they're yapping, yes, but they're still able to effectively do their jobs. Now, despite the channel name being overly critical, I'll try and not nitpick every little thing because I know if I do that, no one will stick around for the more important points of criticisms. So even though I want to, as most of them don't actually matter that much, I won't. The things I do harp on, though, will have importance. So keep that in mind. Like this clip here of Mark letting Rex die. Yes, this matters because the show is clearly trying to force tension and suspense here when it literally makes no sense. Mark can go through buildings, lift icebergs, fly at high speeds while entering the atmosphere, and yet he's taking time to tear apart these poles. He has the capability of just flying through them, and if really necessary, he could just fly up and then go down to where Rex is and grab him. Only reason Rex doesn't just straight up die here is that it's revealed that Duplicate is actually alive, which leads us to a major problem with the show. Verisimilitude in the show's lack of it. Try saying that 3 times fast. 5 times fast might be harder, whatever. As you either get stuff like Rex and Duplipal, where there should be no way Rex dies to him here, but the show manufactures tension leading to you being pulled out of a scene, or you get the entire teen team being alive after the Lizard League, thus leading to times when a moment should be tense and suspenseful, but just leaves you rolling your eyes because you've read the same script 1,000 times. I understand having 1 or 2 survivors, but everyone on the teen team surviving is so cheap, as that means you had 3 fake out deaths from 1 fight. This already isn't good, but it can be salvaged by having meaningful interactions between characters, since many of them thought Duplicate was dead and wasn't sure how Shrink Ray was going to make it. However, there isn't any of this. This is especially bad with Duplicate, as the reveal of her being alive has almost no impact on anyone's reactions, instead acting as if she was just someone they hadn't seen in a while. not as if they all thought she was dead. The only person who had a reasonable response was Duplipol. Now, to be fair, the other ones aren't as bad as duplicates, as you can argue that Shrink Ray's recovery everyone saw and all that happened off screen prior to Kate's reintroduction to the team, but I don't think that's how you treat a character you're trying to get the audience to be invested in by giving them a whole romantic subplot. All right, yeah, whatever. On to the main conflict of the episode. Tremors are going around North America. They understandably almost immediately think of Doc Seismic, who they have locked underground. And they wonder who's causing all the problems. Like, come on. The worst part is they think he's innocent after being able to control subterranean creatures because he's meditating. He's such a good boy. Again, on its own is whatever. Head scratching, but fine. Writing mistakes happen, and it's not like the government is perfect either, so you could chalk this up to an in-universe mistake, except these kinds of oversights consistently happen throughout the show. And if you don't believe me, then you can just watch the rest of the video, as I'll be keeping a counter of every stupid thing we see the government and Cecil do over the course of the show. So anyways, before we continue with the main plot, we see Mark carrying a car for his friends at night while flying.
That's a surprise tool that can help us later.
Anyways, we then have something that everyone, or at least a reasonable amount of people, have criticized. Eve's role in the story. And I obviously agree, as her role for much of this season is just her consoling Mark while they sit on a rooftop and then them fucking. Whoa! Made all the worse by her constantly pointing out how convenient this relationship is. Editor overly critical here. I had someone try to tell me that this is what a relationship is about. Now, to be fair, the way they explained it is that a lot of a relationship is you being there for your partner. My response being that in of itself is not a problem. The problem is that that's all that we see of them in this season. By the way, if you want to debate or have a discussion with me on this show or anything else for review, just let me know. Editor overly critical out, blah, blah, blah. The other problem I had with this scene is Eve saying her house is falling apart when they've had drinking potteries there. And there was never any evidence of it falling apart. It just seems like a poor excuse for Mark and Eve to fuck in the same house as his mom and little brother. I'm nitpicking again. I'll just start flashing this on screen from now on. All right, back to the main plot line. So Dr. Seismic has captured the world's heroes, most of whom can fly. Okay, at least Immortal makes sense since he has to be useless in every scene. None of them are able to break through the webbing though, that a Sinclair robot easily tears through. None of them are able to laser or cut a hole through. All the heroes are just totally worthless for this plot to happen. Anyways, Mark and Eve don't really care that Dr. Seismic did all this. I was gonna nitpick that, but whatever. They bumble in, blah, blah, blah. You know, I have a problem with that, whatever. Oh my gosh. See, the problem here is that no one goes for Dr. Seismic, even though he's totally defenseless. Eve flies in when she has the ability to shoot out projectiles, and then she's the one that gets blasted. Goodbye. There's also the fact that she could just turn the cocoons into anything else, but hey, we all know this is how Eve is, and besides, I've had stands of season 3 tell me that they might be sentient, so she can't do that to them. Whatever. That doesn't excuse the way she gets clapped by Doc Seismic. This is whatever, SpongeBob meme go. So after everyone is saved by Darkwing and the Sinclair robots, Mark goes ballistic, bodies Darkwing, and starts making a big deal out of it. Now, Immortal comes in and tries defusing the situation, and Mark just storms off. So from everyone's perspective, Mark is acting erratic and violence prone as he storms off to go to Cecil. The rating for this episode is a 2. This episode is only brought up by a point because of the Nolan stuff, and that stuff is minimal, so it's not going up by much. Now let's talk about Cecil. People think he's the best character in the show, with episode 2 being considered a high note in the show before it gets stale in the middle section. However, this is by far his weakest showing. This episode actively hurts his character from previous seasons. Now, episode 2 begins with Cecil's backstory. Again, I'll hold back on the nitpicking, so I'll just flash this on the screen. But I will point out that this evil chick grabs his wrist and then breaks it. There's the typical crack, his hand going off in a direction, and then of course his cry of pain. And this dude is back to boxing her with that same fist. You could have cut that entire clip of her hurting his wrist and it would change nothing about this fight. All right, that's not the main problem of this fight, but I had to point that out at least. So eventually another dude shows up and Cecil loses and they release the gas, and immediately their skin peels off and liters of blood drop to the floor. Their breathing turns super raspy, likely from the gas pulverizing their lungs. Cecil then pushes them into the thing that's excreting the gas, and they're already dead at this point, and they just drop like a couple of ragdolls in there. It then cuts to Cecil having his skin melt off, blood dripping from his eye, the muscles underneath his skin bubble and pop. Now he survives this, but whatever, you know, the power of the US government. But then the next scene, Cecil is talking to the director, and it's revealed that 17 people died because of some of the gas leaked into the market. Now, the reason I felt the need to narrate that clip and point out the obvious is because it then cuts there of normal athletes who can do acrobatics and basic martial arts in a world that includes Shapesmith and Monster Girl. Furthermore, if they are capable of saving these two criminals who are just straight sludge at this point, how are there 17 deaths when they save these two criminals trapped inside that gas chamber? Now, if you want to argue this is a show trying to show the flaws of the government, then fine, whatever. But to not even have Cecil say anything about that specifically when he made such a big deal of it earlier, like, come on. Whatever, the main point is them surviving, which is a problem I've pointed out in general in this series, where characters will survive when they shouldn't, thus making death, or at least the possibility of it, meaningless. Anyways, Cecil then goes to a super-powered prison. Why? No, seriously, why? Cecil's just a dude. He can go to a normal jail. And because they don't say why, not even a throwaway line of dialogue, this just comes off as the writers doing this so that Cecil looks more impressive becoming the boss of these guys, which is exactly what they're doing. And because the writer's goal is so apparent, it breaks the immersion. Speaking of which, Cecil is somehow capable of entering a prison full of superpowered criminals, and after 3 years is somehow the boss of this place. Okay, you can argue that he used diplomacy and manipulation to become the boss and make it a more peaceful area, but as we'll see later on, there's nothing backing up this idea in this episode. I will say I like what they're trying to go for in this scene with the you can either be the good guy or the guy who saves the world. It's a good line, and it's a succinct way of having the characters talk about the theming without it running into the problem other shows have where they just state the message. I mean, I like Invincible. I loved season 1, especially its finale when Mark said, "I'll still have you, Dad." And man, I tear up every time I watch that scene. And that's why I'm making this video, because season 3 failed. As even while I'm pointing out a positive point in the show, it's undermined by the fact that Cecil isn't very smart at saving the world, which you can file that under nitpicks, but given the fact that the people involved are integral to the fallout between Cecil and Mark, and one of them isn't like the other, I feel compelled to point this fact out. Because all Darkwing did was kill criminals, which, don't get me wrong, is bad, but this is like if the Punisher was treated the same as Nazi scientists. Like, come on, man. Like, I'm also pointing it out here because there's a much more egregious example coming later on, and so I need to point out how this is just a general problem throughout the episode. But to get back to what I was saying earlier, Cecil just does a terrible job with Mark in general, causing Mark to get angrier and try closing in. Also, the Sinclair bots behind Cecil are literally just horror farming with the squad. Also, Cecil saying he doesn't want to use the earpiece because he doesn't want to bring him down if he doesn't know where he's going to hit, presumably not hurt people, but he used it when Mark was over a city, and then doesn't use it when Mark is over the Guardians of the Globe HQ. All right, the main problem outside of execution of using the earpiece thing that Cecil made is even entering the White Room and using the Sinclair robots on Mark this early. What Cecil should have done instead is come up with a reason to end the conversation so that he can have this discussion when Mark has come down a bit, and not when Mark has just come back from battle. Say something like, "Oh, I have other government duties to attend to. If you really want, we can discuss this later tonight or tomorrow," or something along those lines, and thus give Mark space and time to calm down. Now, I wouldn't be this harsh if it wasn't for the fact that this very episode essentially set up Cecil being this smart and with the Guardians that just makes everything way, way, way worse. As when Mark is in front of them, Cecil essentially says, "We're not doing anything to him." Proceeds to what? "Guys, look at Mark, look at what he's doing. The violence, oh." But no, he tortured, and Cecil has the audacity to start lecturing Mark after Mark has gone for 3 attempts to attack him. Also, Mark choking out. Anyways, in the next scene, you have Donald questioning employing Darkwing. Donald of all people shouldn't give 2 flying Fox. They already employ Sinclair, whose crimes are akin to the fucking Nazis, who Donald has personal trauma with. Not the Nazis, but you know what I mean. Oh, but Darkwing is on the Guardians of the Globe and Sinclair isn't. It's not the same thing. Well, guess what? Can't even say that he zeroes in on Darkwing because he's on the Guardians of the Globe when fucking Shapesmith is on this team. Shapesmith! For those of you who don't remember, Shapesmith at bare minimum is responsible for the death of an astronaut, and at worst basically ended his entire race. What makes it even worse is in the scene directly after, in Cecil's backstory, Donald is super receptive to Cecil being his boss and the director of the fucking Pentagon, despite Cecil also killing criminals who at this point were US agents and weren't even criminals anymore. And then it's also implied he did terrible things to bring order to the prison he was sent to. Oh my gosh, that's not even the half of it. Here's why Cecil's backstory actively makes prior seasons worse. Alright, so here Cecil and Donald both think Nolan is lying, and Cecil tells them to cook up countermeasures against him. First off, Nolan thinks he's protecting Earth. Nothing he says is a lie here, as he believes Vildrum rule is infinitely to why he was lying when he was just in a fight. You see why that doesn't make sense here, right? Since, flying around fighting a giant monster would probably spot aliens lying with human standards, their only countermeasures are things they made in season 1. After Nolan kills the Guardian of the Globe and there's a ton of incriminating evidence, are there any actual countermeasures that are made even when he's the only one who killed them? This actively makes season 1 worse, as they now had years to countermeasure and they do jack shit. But he's Omni-Man. What are they supposed to do? They had Omni-Man in a coma, and they're like, nah, the guy we think is evil is innocent of the obvious crime of killing the Guardians of the Globe. They put a couple of invisible dudes in his house and an orbital strike, which is just a general weapon that you would use for general monster type things. Then we have Mark and Eve on the rooftop, whatever. I already said my piece on the relationship. Moving on. Episode 2 is a 1 out of 10 episode of television. From Cecil's backstory ruining prior seasons, to the overemphasis on Darkwing, to the Guardians' lackluster breakup and the conversations after, and then to top it all off, Eve's and Mark's shallow relationship. This episode doing the worst thing a continuation or sequel can do, ruining prior works rather than lifting it up. This video is already long, so I'll just say episode 3 starts off strong and leave the compliments at that. Now, the main problem with this episode is towards the end with the neuralizer, as it's too strong a weapon for Cecil and the government to not salvage. And we actually catch a glimpse of the neuralizer in episode 6 or 7. So it's strange that this is never brought up again, especially given the fact that not only is there the Invincible invasion, but also the fight against Conquest, leading to another point against Cecil. Another short one, baby. Anyways, the Rex and Shrink Ray stuff in this episode is pretty good, and as everyone knows, this episode is when Mark gets sent to the future. In it, it's eventually revealed that I'm Mortal has gone crazy from living so long, but why only now is I'm Mortal affected by the woes of living so long when he's shown no signs of this before? He's already lived thousands of years before this with seemingly no effect on his mental state. Also, the suicide thing is super dumb, since this is just suicide with an extra step. Also, the robots being programmed in such a way that the king has to die for the rule to be returned to the people is dumb as shit. This half of the episode sucks balls. Second half of the episode, no complaints. Battle Beast is cool. Glad to see him again. And obviously Omni-Man too. Now, for my rating, honestly, originally I was going to be quite harsh on this episode, but on further review, I would say it's somewhere between a 5 and a 6, as the second half of the episode is really good, and even the first half has some good parts, i.e. Rex. Alright, episode 5 is a bit of a snooze, and it seems people agree, as most people tend to just say, Cecil stuff at the beginning of the season was so cool, and the final 3 episodes are so good, and then no one brings up episodes 3 through 5. Anyways, near the start of the episode, Duplicate Paul attempts to break out of prison, and the way he leaves his cell is cool. But then later on in the episode, it's revealed Oliver is sneaking out at night to hang out with kids, and not only does he not have his painted skin on, but he is showing his powers to them.
That's a surprise tool.
Alright, we don't need to do that again. The problem here, and a general problem in this season, is the lack of care or consequence regarding secret identities. The show put so much emphasis on it in season 1, so it's strange that they would then drop it in this season. Even if you argue that it's the characters not caring as much due to being preoccupied with something else, or some other reason, for there to be no consequence makes it feel less that this is a world that I'm viewing and more like someone wrote it. Now, this flaw in this season by itself is bad, but it's not enough to ruin the season. Problem is this combined with everything else.
Right, so I'll take it from here for these next 2 episodes. So episodes 6 and 7 are some of the most highly regarded episodes in the entire show.
And I'm here to say that they are slop. They are slop episodes that people hype way too much. My friend here isn't as passionate about these episodes as I am, but these episodes are still really bad. So let's begin with episode 6. There are some redeeming qualities about episode 6, like Powerplex and Powerplex. It's really just Powerplex, and specifically his dynamic with the world. While the whole episode reeks of bad and contrived writing like every episode prior, I just wanted to focus on one aspect that really ruins even the Powerplex half of this story, and that is the GDA. So let's really get into what makes this episode so bad. Because everything surrounding the GDA is so brain-numbing to watch, even just Mark. So let's start with some of the smaller things, like mention Mark. Mark in this episode just feels like he's been lobotomized due to his hate for the GDA. Mark is so deluded, he's like, look what they hid from us. And it's like a public memorial for the dead. Like, how the fuck would the GDA have even blocked them from seeing this? This is also after Mark flies to the event, no costume on, just out in the open. I guess no one has a phone. No one can see that Mark is just has his face exposed. The GDA isn't coming for you, little bro. And I don't think they even could at this point with how incompetent they are. And don't even get me started on Donald and Mark's dynamic. But that'll all be for later. Powerplex working for the GDA. It's such a baffling decision. The only thought they put into that plot point was, this is how Powerplex will get his amplifiers, with no forethought on how it'll affect the rest of the episode. Like how Powerplex isn't just instantly caught by the first encounter, even when he escapes. His mask doesn't hide his face! They already noticed some of the very obvious GDA tech missing, attached to his body. And this new villain is yelling to the heavens, I hate Invincible! I bet even his coworkers would know it was him if they just looked at the news. All it would take is one look into the employee handbook and he's done. Oh look, our employee stole all our things and is committing terrorism. Wow. I have no idea why this is just from the perspective of an extremist citizen. It would change literally nothing about the story. It'd make him harder to track. And it's honestly really a more interesting perspective having this be from one of the normal people affected by the fight between Invincible and Omni-Man. Especially since the public doesn't have 100% confirmation that Mark was trying to stop Omni-Man. The GDA has direct confirmation that that was the case. But, whatever. Let's get back to the GDA and how incompetent they are in every scene. So the truck. This is probably the second dumbest scene in the entire episode. After Powerplex is beaten the second time, they transfer him back to the GDA. Remember, he found that he gets his power from hurting himself. Everyone knows this. Everyone knows this at this point. No padded truck. Let's say they didn't have time to switch transport trucks, right? But then he starts hitting himself, obviously trying to power himself up. And while one of the guards correctly assesses what he's trying to do, the other goes, let him cook. And then just lets him keep hitting himself. And then, holy fuck, the worst driver known to man on screen. The discharge just makes the truck honk once. And he gets back control of the wheel. What do you think this man does? A, stop the car. B, try and stabilize. Or C, swerve 3 fucking times in a big-ass armored vehicle and drive off the bridge. You guessed it, C, that's how Powerplex escapes. The GDA isn't even able to track him after this, which leads to the final confrontation. Have you ever seen something so bafflingly stupid, you'd have to sit back and think, what must have been the event in someone's life to do, say, or make something so brain dead? So let's dive back into Mark vs. Powerplex, shall we? Even just the setup to this fight is insane. Donald has been feeding Mark information, which just fully devalues Mark leaving the GDA. Another decision with the only foresight being like, how is Mark going to fight Powerplex? How does the GDA not find Powerplex straight up? Uh-oh, Master of Disguise over here. We can't track down the guy with no mask on. And Mark, of course, just needs to go up there. It's not like there are other heroes, or just even the invisible agents from Season 1 that would be able to easily handle Powerplex in this situation. Anyway, Mark confronts Powerplex, exactly what he wants, and wow. Let's just get through it. Mark has one job in this entire fight, and it's to restrain Powerplex. Everyone knows this. Eve told everybody. All Mark has to do in this fight is defend and pin him down. Oh no, Mark is getting shocked a little bit. That's too much for Mark to handle. So, of course, fucking Thor Mark that can't even handle a fucking human, punches Powerplex. Let's talk about this scene. Mark has seen what Powerplex can do after Eve hit him. He fucking body slams in midair. So at best, Mark is risking getting body slammed midair, hostages in hand. No one knows Powerplex cares about these hostages. Mark doesn't even hit Powerplex out of the building. Just to get some wall, buying himself 0 time to even get the hostages out. Even if he did, just instantly grab them. And then the wife just spits on him or whatever. And it's like, oh my gosh, Mark failed because she spit on him, whatever. And then Fried family. Even Powerplex is very out of character in this exchange. He wants to show the world that Invincible isn't a hero. But now he just wants to kill him, turn him into a martyr. No cameras or recordings. He doesn't even try to get him outside for all to see, and Mark has to like wrestle him in. Just a private fight Mark wouldn't have even seen if it wasn't for Donald. It just felt like they were trying to rush to the part where Powerplex's family dies. It's the most obvious part of the episode. Oh no, he's yelling at his family. Oh, he almost shocked his wife. What could possibly happen? The whole scene just felt so rushed to get to the how could you Invincible thing that every single episode has already been leading up to this. Honestly, to me, this episode is like a 4 out of 10. Even if I think that the whole episode setup is really stupid and it could have done better. Hearing Aaron Paul was really enjoyable, like unironically. He did kind of carry this whole episode, his performance. Seeing if you really turn your brain off, him watching his family die to his own hands is very sad. And like even like the little exchange at the end with Invincible and Powerplex, Invincible trying to like comfort him or whatever with these like empty words, and then Powerplex just epically owning Mark, which was like kind of honestly satisfying, especially with every single episode prior of every single episode. It's like, oh my god, how could you Invincible have been so awful? Like fucking the I Am Mortal, you must kill me, Mark, but like only you can kill me, and like I can't even kill myself. And then like at least it was better than that. But episode 7 has very few redeeming qualities, so let's just hop right into it. So let's begin with episode 7, shall we? So let's just get through a few nitpicks before we get to the broader point. So Powerplex's escape in the prison is just kind of silly. It's like he gets knocked out by Mark, and then somehow, because he's able to tank a hit from like our Mark, which is stronger than all the Invincibles, and later on he just kills the Mark, which is like, it makes sense. He would probably be able to kill a Mark that doesn't know about his powers, but just like, how was he knocked out the first time? Whatever. Second thing, just the whole thing in the prison where the heroes didn't know that Mark was the good Mark, even though he was the only one helping them and not killing them. It's like they see like one Mark helping them out, even though they know Mark had a suit change. It's not yellow, and they're like, we have to get this guy. Like this is kind of silly. The Tomb of Core Horror was like something that's been set up for like multiple seasons, and like its payoff was very disappointing. Like it was just like, oh, it just gets taken out by like the fight between I Am Mortal and the other Invincible. Rick's heart was like a pretty big deal, and then they just like kind of forget about it. He like lifts rubble from his boyfriend, and then he just like, and then there's no repercussions for that. Just a smaller, funnier thing are the shitty heroes sent out by the GDA. Like, who here thinks that Boss Baby is gonna take out an Invincible? Like, they literally just sent him out to die. But it's just a track record of GDA being dumb as shit. And then like, just a broader point, some of the payoffs later on, like Eve's mom coming to talk to Mark and being like, the whole emotional payoff being like, you know, one time we saw a girl die and she didn't have powers, but our girl has powers, so I guess her being a hero is fine because she's not dead. Which is like, okay, I kind of wish that like Eve saved her parents or something, or there's like anything beforehand that would lead up to this moment with Mark and her mom. But like, same thing with I Am Mortal just leaving. He's like, he does nothing all season. He loses every single fight. So, and then he's like, I'm leaving. I'm gonna go get some duplicate pussy, bro. Like, he literally just leaves to bang duplicate after doing nothing all season. Like, it was just a terrible payoff. Even just like the scene with Mark registering like, oh my god, Rex is dead. Like, Mark barely reacts, and then like Cecil does like the worst recruitment method ever. It just felt like a lost episode is very lacking in payoffs. So let's get to the meat of this episode, which is Angstrom Levy. So this episode already begins horribly, with Angstrom just surviving, being splattered across the floor. Honestly, just this decision alone for this episode just totally devalues the Mark, I thought you were stronger, Mark accidentally killing Levy. Anyway, so Levy goes across the multiverse after this to get the most depraved, power-hungry Marks, which are all weaker than our Mark. You're telling me Cecil's training is more effective than what proper Viltrumites can teach? Some of them were with Nolan. Anyway, we'll come back to that later, but let's get to the dawn of the first day. Now, there are 18 Invincibles causing havoc, and let's see what everyone is up to. Mark is helping out in the prison, fair. Mark doesn't do anything too terribly this section, but Debbie and Oliver. Debbie just sends Oliver out to die, straight up. Like, there are Marks that, from everyone's perspective, are as strong as our Marks, since they're all Viltrumites. Debbie, with already heavy Viltrumite trauma, with her son getting beat near death, is like, you know, actually, these guys are the ones you can fight, Oliver. Not the supervised training, not the anything like that. No. Yeah, let's have you fight more Viltrumites. Like, this just feels like such insane character assassination for Debbie, just so that Oliver could be in this fight. Like, and Debbie's like a very consistently good character, so it just felt so it just felt so strange. And then our GDA, guess what our GDA is up to? They're about to get soloed by a weaker Mark. Like, this one Mark takes out all of the engineering wing, and then just somehow manages to land a punch on Cecil, which doesn't instantly obliterate him, kills Donald, or like attempts to kill Donald because he's a robot, and then we have like the most insulting scene ever with the button breaking. Like, what would have even broke the button? He pressed it too much? Like, how do they not have the sound just everywhere in the Pentagon? Like, they're preparing for a Viltrumite invasion, and a single Mark almost took them all out. Like, and a shitty Mark too, because they're weaker than Mark. Looks like Mark really rubbed off on the GDA. Dawn of the second day. Oliver is out helping people. Last time we saw him, he was throwing around elephants as he technically wasn't hurting anyone, slamming him into cars and stuff and damaging property. Where did this change of heart come from? While not bad, I just wish we got to see Oliver grow into a more compassionate hero, rather than kill bad guy. Like, I just really wish that we got to see more of compassionate Oliver. Especially, this also feels especially out of character with what's going to happen on the third day. GDA just sending out heroes to die. Like, we just cut to just like heroes getting sent to the slaughterhouse. Mark and Eve's fight is pretty good. Even though Eve feels very weak for what's about to come in episode 8. She just gets bodied by like a weaker Mark. And that's kind of just like she gets decommissioned from a weaker Mark. And we never see her use any of her powers, just like same Eve complaints. Like, though the tag team was very enjoyable. Seeing like both of them fight like in sync felt really satisfying. That's one thing I'll give this episode. That's another thing I'll give this episode. So now we cut to a different tag team fight. The I Am Mortal literally throwing and getting the Guardians killed. He was handed this Mark. He was handling this Mark well enough to just be throwing him around. But now he leads the Invincible back to their home base, even after he was handling this Invincible, just to get everyone killed. And then the Rex sacrifice scene. Oh my god. It's like a cool scene, but how it gets to it... Let's paint a picture, shall we? Bulletproof is ore farming. Somehow Rex survived the kill shot from a Mark, and Monster Girl got beat, I guess. Not enough to die. And Intelligent Robot, is using his remote control drones. Decides to stay in one of them. Just to be captured, I guess. Just so that they have an excuse to be like, oh my gosh, Rex got caught. So while Bulletproof is ore farming, he's not taking the hostages out, the two deathly injured teammates. And Bulletproof is able to, like, sort of handle a Mark. So while he just sits standing there, letting all the drones get destroyed, he's just jerking off doing nothing. And then we have the most bullshit scene where they just have to like, oh my god, leave me here, guys. Where Rex just has to die because he's already set up all the death flags. Man, I love living so very much. And like, they really just wanted Rex to die after getting all his growth for this bullshit emotional gut punch, which kind of worked, but like it was just like I couldn't enjoy it just because how dumb the setup for his death scene was. And that was the good half of the episode. Now let's get to the Angstrom Levy part. Good in quotations. Day 3, dawn of the third day. First, Levy walks in on all the Invincibles without bargaining at all. All the Invincibles are still useful to his plan. Based on what he says later, he just stands there doing nothing while all the Invincibles talk about torturing Levy. He doesn't even make a deal or bargain that they haven't finished their end of the deal. He just pushes them all away with a single drone. How does he do that? For the ones looking at the portal, fine. Maybe they get knocked off balance. But a couple look at the drones coming at them. They don't do anything to escape the highly telegraphed maneuver that they had to fly any direction to dodge. Besides, based on what we see later, these drones shouldn't even have the force necessary to even push an Invincible. Mixed signals, I guess. The thing should just be smashing against the chest if it tried. The Mark fight with Angstrom was incredibly lame. Mark should have lost instantly after grabbing Levy, since he could just portal with Mark, GG. For a guy with access to infinite universes worth of tech, that's all he can muster? Like, just a bunch of shitty drones? The neuralizer gun is stronger than the shitty drones. Him just fighting with drones is just so lame. And it's the inconsistency that makes the drones annoying. A couple are able to initially push Mark around, even though he sees them coming, but thousands aren't able to push him back. How does Levy run out of them? It's not like Mark is destroying them until he starts punching. Even then, he's only destroying one at a time. Can't he just loop them around? Every time he sends the drones through a dimension, he just lose them forever? For a weapon like this, he doesn't even use them creatively. He just like sends a ton of them and is like, kill Mark, and then Mark just dodges. Like, even just the whole fight, if Mark gets pushed back even once, he loses. But no, Levy has to put the portal like 5 feet behind Mark so he can be like, ooh, I'm struggling against them. It was just so ridiculous. And then Mark holds Levy, and then Oliver's like, kill him, even though he was just being compassionate earlier. Like, he wasn't trying to fight the Marks at all, or he wasn't seeking out a fight or anything, but now he's just here with Mark, just like telling him to kill this guy, and then the worst scene in this episode happens. Mark is about to finish him off, and Levy sends a single drone. A single drone hits Mark. Maybe he gets flinches. Maybe he goes... No, he gets knocked back and slides on the ground before Levy he barely escapes. We've seen how many orbs it takes to make Mark move at all. Yet one orb was able to not only ground Mark, but substantially push him back. Also, what was Levy's deal? Couldn't he just open any universe first to fulfill any deal that was made? For the Marks, he hates them, so it makes sense why he wouldn't. But for the guys that are about to enslave him, because Levy took the dumbass potion that Mark's been on all season, and all he accomplished was let the evil Invincibles destroy a bunch of shit. And even then, his plan ended early, lose to Mark with infinite tech at his disposal, and ended up enslaved. Wow, what a cool villain to bring back. After the news broadcast, we see Mark reflecting, and he's like, you can't blame yourself for being a good person. Holy shit, that doesn't make sense in context. Mark tried to kill Levy. It's like Mark already killed Levy. It's not like he spared him and regrets leaving him alive. He killed Levy. And then it's like, man, I wish I killed him harder. It was actually so refreshing seeing Mark reflect, and I was like, this is actually a pretty good part of the episode. Until Eve comes in, it's like, oh, Invincible, it's not your fault. It just ruins the whole scene. Like, honestly, this whole episode is just a 3. Just because there's so many payoffs with zero buildup, the Angstrom parts are just barely watchable. And then, like, the only good parts being the first half, and only the parts with the Invincibles talking, just makes it a 3. This whole episode was just miserable to watch. And overly critical, you could take it from here.
All right, originally I was going to make a big deal about the IMDb rating of this episode, with me ranting about how it has a slightly higher rating than episode 8 of season 1 when it shouldn't. But over the past year, since season 3, I've done some reflecting. And while my overall opinion on the season hasn't changed, I realized that me overemphasizing a few flaws in episode 8 past the point of what I actually thought mattered isn't going to do anything, and more importantly would be going against what I set out to do in making not only this video, but this channel. Now, this isn't to say that I was faking anything for the previous episodes. I wasn't. What I am saying is that I was unfairly letting my opinion of those previous episodes, along with the bitterness I had with this season's reception, distort what I actually felt about this episode. So, how do I feel about this episode? Well, for starters, it's very good. The animation is notably better, Conquest is fun, intimidating, and interesting all at once. For the first time this season, the show actually had me wondering if a character was going to die. That being when Conquest was about to split apart all over, and hell, even Mark had some cool lines.
I can see the future. You don't live to see tomorrow.
That goes hard. Don't get me wrong, this episode obviously isn't perfect. We all already know about Eve, and I'm sure most of you know that Cecil not having more restraints set up on Conquest is kind of dumb. The only real criticism I have for this episode that I don't see brought up is Debbie letting Oliver go off to fight Conquest. As throughout the season, the show has been building up to Oliver being seen as an actual kid. One good example being when Oliver was seen playing with other kids at night. And it also doesn't make sense that Debbie would let Oliver go considering her trauma and also just the flat out danger of the situation. And that's it really, actually. Sure, there are nitpicks, but no one wants to hear that if you're even still here. So why did I make this video, this channel? I've hinted at it before, but never actually gave a reason as to why. Well, the most surface level and obvious reason is that I don't think Invincible Season 3 is good, and that's an unpopular opinion. But the deeper reason is that something I feel is missing from the video essay space is dialogue and the sharing of different perspectives. Oftentimes, it seems as if people are fine with just listening to one perspective if that is the one they agree with. And if they do listen to one that's different from their own, it's often from their favorite YouTuber, and that'll typically be one of the few times they'll be persuaded. Not necessarily because their favorite YouTuber made a compelling case, but because that case was made by their favorite YouTuber. And you can see how some YouTubers try to fight back against this. One example being Shrefilas Productions, when a couple years back he would make community posts which featured videos from other creators that disagreed with him, which I think was a great decision by him and a step in the right direction. Now there's a great video called The Pitfalls of Popular Opinions that I think you guys should check out. Self-explanatory title aside, one thing this video brought up is how it can sometimes be fulfilling simply having your opinions validated. And while I don't agree with everything in this video, what they brought up certainly resonated with me, leading to my awesome call to action. Make your own opinions, think for yourselves. Cliche, I know, but something you should do regardless. But that's why I made this channel and video, and I think I made some pretty good points as to why Invincible Season 3 isn't all that. But regardless, to back this up, I am more than willing to discuss or debate Invincible or any other piece of media that I've watched, really. This can be in the comments or it can be on stream. I might do Twitter in the future. I don't know. I haven't checked it out before. Now, in the off chance too many people show up, in the really off chance, really, there will eventually be limits put on this, but I doubt that'll happen. Thank you for watching. Comment how I'm a genius for realizing this or how I'm an idiot for thinking this. Like, share, and subscribe.